Hello all, welcome back to Smart India Hackathon 2019, Designing Digital Solution Training Program. I am Abhijit Gole, working as a technical trainer along with Persistent University. This session is basically a continuation of the last module that we have seen about overview of React Native. So in this particular module, that is about overview of React Native module 2, we will be talking about remaining concepts which we haven't seen in the last session. So today's session is all about the demos, the concepts which are involved as a part of React Native. So hope you guys are curious about it, to know about the different concepts and doing their actual implementation. Let's begin. So this is what we have seen in the last module. These are the three demos that we have seen, like going for a simple component called as a bananas. We explore about the styles as well, and two main very important things is dealing with the props and dealing with the state. So I just quickly recap of these things and then we'll go for the today's concepts and demos. So basically, by using a React Native CLI, when you create this particular application, this kind of folder structure is get created for it. From our perspective, what is important is to know about the index.js, to know about the app.js. We are dealing with the different node packages, so that's why we are going to have a package.json where we are taking care of installation of different packages over there. So index.js is a file which is responsible for having an app registry. So I'm giving a basically call to app registry.register component, which is responsible for what? So app registry is a JavaScript entry point to running all React Native apps. So whichever is going to be your app root component, in our case it's going to be the app coming from this app.js, that should register themselves with the app registry.register component. Then the native system can load the bundle for the app and then actually run the app when it's ready to be invoking by app registry.run application. So that's the reason we are going for specifying the app root component in app registry.register component that is responsible for running this application by loading the native system. So if you have a look at this, your app component is going to have a view template. What did I say about the view template? It's a basic building block of React Native. So in case of React Native, if you are going to have some kind of component as a kind of container component, I would be going for a view, the most fundamental component of building UI. Like if you talk from React perspective, you go for a web application. In that case, div is going to be a most building block. So same way here, we are going to have a most fundamental component for building UI, nothing but a view. So it's going to be a kind of container that supports the layout. So today we will be focusing about the flexbox, different styles, touch handling. So all these things are supported by this particular component, that is a view. So it's acting as a container over there. So I just want to show one text which is saying something like a welcome to React Native Smart India Hackathon 2019. So what I'm doing is, first of all, to run this application, as I said, like on my machine I have installed the Android Studio. We are going to launch the emulator. This is the emulator which is launched by using AVD. So Android virtual device, and then that particular AVD emulator is available. To run my React Native application, there are a few commands I am running. I said the first thing that I need to do is React Native start by default on a port 8081. If it is not going to start on that one, you can change the port. So I'm starting this particular stuff on the port 8088. So the command that I was running here was on my node command prompt React Native start -- port 8088. After that, I'm trying to create a bridge between this particular application and Android emulator. So that is by using ADB. So that is something stands for Android debug bridge. So you can see the command here, ADB-S emulator 554 that is what is my emulator that I'm using. So reverse TCP 8080 to TCP 8080. So that's gonna do that connection. After that, React Native run Android. So starting my React Native application which should run on that particular emulator. So it could be on emulator, it could be on actual device as well. So it is trying to show you welcome to React Native Smart India Hackathon 2019. Suppose I want to make some kind of change. So I'll say Welcome to React Native. This is Smart India Hackathon 2019. I did this kind of change. I don't need to go and recompile my code again. I just need to refresh this. So by pressing double R, or I can go for the Control M, and that's my development mode, and there I would say the reload. So you can see welcome to React Native. This is Smart India Hackathon 2019. So that's what is the benefit we discussed in the last session, right? Regarding installation of all these things, again tomorrow by today end of this session, I'll show you the steps, or the link would be available. So I'll just share that link. You can just go through and have the necessary software installed. Fine. So as per that, yesterday we explored about something called as one simple component. So I just have created one component called as a bananas. If you have a look at this, it's just a React component extended from the component which is coming from the React. Want to use one image there, so that's why going for image component from the React Native. So source is getting binded with the pic. Pic is this property which is available there. So it is just trying to show me a banana. So that's the image that I have there. So if I just reload it again, you can see that banana is available. Along with this, you would have noticed when we have created this app one, we have used some kind of styles there. So to explain this, I just have created another component, that is lots of style component, and I'm trying to use the different styles. So when I want to go for any of the style, this is my JavaScript expression that I will be using in a React Native. So within that, this is the key value pair I would be having. So I have to go for a double curly braces if I want to actually go and create the style by using a style sheet. So again, this is the component which is coming from React Native. This allows me to create the different styles. So styles is going to be a collection of different style sheets. I'm having name as a big blue, green. What did we discuss about the styles? Like with React Native, you don't use a special language or syntax for defining a style. Instead, what you do is you just style your application using JavaScript itself. So a lot of the core concepts or components accept a prop named style. So if you see here, each and every core component going to have a prop called as a style, where I would be setting these values. Okay. So that style prop can be plain old JavaScript object. That's the simplest way by which you can assign the style to it. So what we are doing in this stuff, we are creating a style, and by styles dot respective name we would be able to apply it. So styles dot green, and the green is being applied. So you can notice here I would be having something like a red and the green. Then the big blue is getting applied, where I'm having not only the color but I'm also dealing with the font width and the font size. Now yesterday I have shown you one example where I am trying to go for a styles.bigblue and styles.red. So it was not giving me any kind of error, even though there is nothing like a red is available here. So that big blue is getting applied to it. So for style, you can even specify an array of styles. But whenever you go for an array of style, what could happen? The last style is getting more priority. But right now there is no last style itself is available. That's why it was not getting there. Instead, if I go for this as styles.green, you can see this is in green color. Whereas here first I am assigning green and then big blue. That's why that is in a blue color. So you can specify the array, but whenever you go for an array, it will take the style which is set at the last. So the last style in the array has a precedence, right? Along with this bananas and this one, we just have created one more component there, that is nothing but a greeting. I wanted to pass some kind of data from parent to child, so we are using a props for that. So in my greeting component, I'm just directly going for a props collection and name. So what I said, there is some kind of data you want to store along with the component. So you can go for something called as a props. Props stand for, it's a kind of properties. So from React Native perspective, props are immutable. You just can't modify them directly. You have to pass a value to that prop by using a state, and state you can modify. Okay, I'm talking about a prop states from the first demo itself right now, because we already have seen that thing in the last session. So here I'm just trying to access one of the props which is available here called as a name. So this is as good as like I have defined a props called as a name, and that would be available there. So when I was not passing any props, it will just simply say it as a hello. Whereas in the second case, I am explicitly passing some separate value to that props. But along with that, what I have done is I have specified some default value to it. So greeting.default props, the props is name, gonna have a value as this. So because of this, if you have a look at the output here, in first render it will be something like hello Sachin Tendulkar, in second it is going to be hello OV. Whereas if I am not going to have these default props, then it would be empty, that name is going to be empty. So it's going to be only hello, and in second case, as I am explicitly passing that props name, it would have that name hello OV. So let's have a default value for that. So again, props is nothing but we just want to store some kind of information along with the component. The only thing is that is immutable. Whereas if you want to store some information that needs to be modified, so you can go for something called as a state. So I am going to have one state, let's say count as a 0. So for my counter component, so initially that state is 0. I just want that state should get modified. So I am handling one of the lifecycle hook available for my all the component, that is a component did mount. We had a discussion regarding this yesterday, rather on the last demo. That is, each and every component should have a render method. Same way, each and every component gonna have some kind of other methods also, but it is not mandatory for us to implement those, but those are definitely gonna be there. What I discussed about this is like if you go for a YouTube kind of application where you are streaming some video, and if some other application pop out on that particular device of any user, your application is going to be inactive. In that case, what should be done? Does your application should do the streaming of video? Does your application should make use of the network bandwidth? Does it utilize the battery which is available on that device? So such kind of things that you can take care on the different lifecycle hooks. So there are different lifecycle hooks like a component will mount, component did mount, component will receive props, based on that should component update. So such kind of different lifecycle hooks you can implement. Those are going to be same with React and React Native. So once this component did mount, what am I responsible for taking care of? It's like my component is getting mounted on that particular app or on that particular device, you could say. Once that is done, I want to modify the state. So that's why I'm going to handle this one. I want to modify the state every after 1 second. So I could go and say like this dot state dot count is equal to this dot state dot count plus 1. But this is not the way by which React Native framework gonna understand state is being modified. So you should always modify the state by using a function called as set state. Then only React Native gonna encounter there is a change in the state. So after 1 second I'm trying to modify the state. So what I'm trying to do here? So from the state I'm gonna get count. From the props I'm gonna get color and size. So wherever I'm gonna render this particular component, that time I would be passing these two props. This is ES 2015, that is ES6 code. We call it as a destructuring. So we are getting the data from this, we are getting the data from this, that is a destructuring. So applying that text with color and font size there, and displaying the count value. So if you have a look at this, I'm just trying to render this n number of times by having a different color and different size over there. So if I just go to this and refresh it, you could see it starts with a 0. Then every after 1 second that counter is getting modified, right? So generally in my parent component, generally in my container component, I'll be having a state. I'll make that component as a stateful, and I'll pass that state data to the child by using props. Okay, these are the things that we discussed in last demo. Today we would be focusing on some other things. So let me show you the agenda for today's session. So if you have a look at this, we are going to discuss about few more concepts about React Native components. We'll be talking about fixed dimension and flex dimension, that is about height and width. We'll be talking about layout with the flexbox. We'll be talking about how do you handle the text input, which is again one of the fundamental UI component available with the React Native. We are trying to understand how scroll view works. We are trying to understand how list view works. So pros and cons of both. Now it's gonna be your mobile native application, great, but that might need to get some kind of data to be fetched from the server, because you just can't have the whole data to be stored on each and every client's device. So in that case, we need to understand fetching data from the server. That is going to be a kind of asynchronous call. So how React Native support us to take care of this. And we are also going to see how we can use different component libraries within our native mobile app. So these are the things that we are going to see today. That is what is the agenda. So let's go for the first thing, that is nothing but dealing with the fixed dimension. So I just go and create a new component where I would be dealing with fixed dimension. So what exactly this is, how we would be doing it, let me do that. So I'll just go for something as height width fixed dimension .js. So basically I'm interested in creating one component that would deal with the dimension of my component. So basically component's height and width determine its size on the screen. So simplest way to set the dimension of a component is by adding fixed width and height to the style. So if you want to set the dimension for any component, the simplest way to do that is add a fixed width and height to that particular component style. So what I would do that, how would I do that? So I just go and import first of all React and React component from the node module React. Same way I'll import few elements from the React Native. So I'm going for at least going to use at least the view. So React -native. Okay. I'm going to use this particular component in my app.js, so I'm going to export it. So when I export it with the default, I can directly import it via its name. If it is not exported as a default, I'll be going to take it using curly braces. So you can have, this is the difference. From this module, the React is being exported default, component is being exported without default. So I'll say fixed dimensions basics, that is being extended from the component. So render return is going to be the view that I would be having. So let me go for one view. The style is going to be, as I want to set some kind of dimension, means what I would be doing is I would be setting some fixed width and fixed height to it. Let's go for a background color. So I'll specify it as a sky blue. So I need to have only one container view. Inside that I can have multiple other things. So I just go and have a different width and height for each of those. So if you notice here, I'm just going for this and I'm gonna render that now in my view over here. So I'll say it's gonna be fixed dimensions basics and rendering of that. So you would notice here fixed dimension is being imported directly with its name, not in a curly braces, because that is being exported as a default. So ES6 way of importing and exporting. I just go and refresh this. So instead of having now counter one, it is going to deal with this particular one. I just comment this text as well. So it would just deal with that particular component, that is a fixed dimension basics, where I'm having a fixed dimension for each and every component, right? So component's height and width determine its size on the screen. The simplest way to set dimension of a component is by adding a fixed width and height to the style. If you would have noticed, all the dimensions in React Native are unitless. I didn't specify any of the unit, and they represent density independent pixels, right? So setting dimension this way is very common for components that should always render at exactly the same size regardless of the screen dimension. But you might even go for having some other dimensions. We call them as a flex dimension. So what's the intention behind that? We just want your dimension of the component should be dynamic. So based on the container, your component size should be dynamic. So you can do it by going for another dimension. We call it as a flex dimension. So for that, what I do, instead of going for this way, I'll create a separate component and there we have a look at this. So I'll say flex dimensions .js. Instead of fixed dimension basics, I'll go for a flex dimension basics. I need to have these things anyway. So when I'm talking something about a flex, that means here I'm dealing with a flex box. So what is a flex box? If anyone is not at all aware about it, flex box is basically a layout which is officially called CSS flexible box layout module. It's new layout module in a CSS 3 that is made to improve so that items can get aligned. They can have directions as well as the order in the container, even they are with dynamic or even unknown size. They are with a dynamic or even unknown size. The prime characteristics of the flex container is that the ability to modify the width or height of its children to fill the available space in the best possible way on different screen sizes. So we just don't want all the time it should be a fixed dimension, it should be a flex dimension, it should be dynamic in nature. So Flexbox works exactly the same way in React Native as it does in CSS. Yes, but with few exceptions. But in most of the cases, yes, it's going to work in that way. So for my flex dimension, what I would be doing is for this outer view, I'll go for a style props and I would be specifying here a flex value. So flex value I'll be specifying for that as a 1. Whereas for the rest, I won't specify now any width and height. I don't hard code any of that, but I'll go for a flex property. So flex 1, flex 2, flex 3. So use flex in component style to have a component expand and shrink dynamically based on the available space. So normally we are going to have a flex 1 which tells a component to fill all available space shared evenly amongst other components with the same parent. The larger the number given, that is 2 and 3, the larger the flex number given, the higher the ratio of space a component will take compared to its sibling. Now I just try to go and render that instead of fixed dimension. So comment it. So you have a look at the output. If you try to see the output, you won't be able to see anything there. So I'll do a little change and then I'll talk about this, what's wrong with it. So I just go for another view instead of this one. And within that view, I just render this flex dimension. But the change that I would do for this view is, for this view, I would go and specify the style props with flex as 1. And then let's say, will it make any difference or no? So can you see that? So basically, what does it mean by that? A component can only expand to fill available space if its parent has a dimension greater than 0. So by default that view was having a dimension 0. We just want now the view that is a parent of this should have a dimension greater than 0. So if parent does not have either a fixed width or height or flex, the parent will have dimension of 0 and the flex children will not be visible. The flex children will not be visible. So now based on that, as I'm having flex 1, 2, 3, I'll make the second one also 1. see the change over there. So these two both are of same size, this is the bigger one. But if I go for 1, 2, 3, you can figure out the difference. Understood? So you would be having now dynamic size for your components based on the available screen size by using a flexbox concept. So let's try to have a more layout with this particular flexbox. So what I would be doing for that is, let's say I'll copy this component as it is. I'll create a separate component. I'll name it as, let's say, layout with flexbox. Just paste it so that I don't need to keep on importing and exporting the things all the time. So when I said something about the flexbox, what are the things that we're going to talk about? So when you say something about a flexbox, the first thing is like, this is same as the CSS3 flexbox. It is basically used to set the layout. So this is something new in a CSS3 that helps you to add something like a flex direction, that helps you to add something like a justify component, as well as that helps you to add align items. So you will basically normally use a combination of flex direction, align items, justify content to achieve the right layout, right? So a component can specify the layout of its children using a flexbox algorithm. The flexbox is something which is designed to provide a consistent layout on different screen sizes. So let's see this flexbox direction, that is flex direction, align items, justify content one by one. So I'll create one component. I'll name it as, instead of flex dimension basics, I'll name it as flex direction basics. So in this, what I would be doing is, I'll just have a view. To this, I'll be having style as this. To this, instead of flex 1, 2, I'll be going for width. I'll be going for height. So instead of flex 1, 2, 3, I'll be just going to have the same width and height for these two views as well. So if I try to render this, as I'm having height and width, this is how it looks. So we are talking about a flex direction here. So flex direction to a component style determines the primary axis of its layout. That means your children should organized either horizontally or vertically. So by default, it's vertically. That means by default the flex direction is column. So I just go inside this and I'll say flex direction is going to be row. So by default the flex direction is column, that's why you see these three views like that. If I just make it as a row, you would see them like this, right? So flex direction to the component style determines primary axis of its layout. So it should be vertically or it should be horizontally getting displayed there. The way we have a flex direction basics, we are also gonna create one more component that would talk about justify content. So adding justify content to the component style determines distribution of children along the primary axis. How the children are getting distributed among the primary axis. Means primary axis in the sense, if it's going to be horizontal, the primary axis is a X, that is a row. If it's a vertical, then the primary axis is going to be column, that is a Y. So what I do for this is, like, I'll just copy the same one as it is, name it as justify content basics. I'll keep this everything as it is. The change that I would do is, I have a flex 1, I have a flex direction. I'll keep it that to column. And here I just go and specify justify content to something. So variety of values gonna be there to specify it. Right now I'll go for a space between. So just go for a space between, and I would like to render this. So I just have copy pasted flex directions and justify content here. Basics and this way. So I want this to show me some kind of error. Right? So some kind of error I would get here. Why I'm getting this kind of error? So the problem is about some internal error it is trying to show me. The problem is about, first of all, is my justify content is being imported there? It is not. So let me do that. Is it coming from the same file? Yes. So I'm trying to do this, but I'm getting error because from any of the file you can export only one thing as a default. So I'll not like export my justify content basis as a default one. But if it is not being exported as a default one, then how do you take care of it? You are importing it within the curly braces. So now it makes sense of importing such kind of stuff in a proper way. Now let's go and refresh it. Justify content, what I specified there is space between. So there is a space between them. I could even go for space around. So there is space going to be there at the beginning also, space around them. I could even have a value like flex end. So it would be at the end of it. Flex start. So it would be at the start of it. Or I can even go for center. So it would be at the center. The flex direction I could specify row, and things would be in horizontal way. Here I'll just go and specify, let's say, space between that. Right? So justify content, when you add it to the component style, it determines the distribution of children along the primary axis. So that could be row or that could be column. So should children be distributed at the start, at the center, at the end, space evenly? That's how it is. So space between, space around, even you have a space evenly. So space, even space is given among them like this. So just go and specify the different values for it as like flex hyphen start, center, flex hyphen end, space around, space between, and definitely the space hyphen evenly. So flex direction, justify content. Third one is about align items. Copy this as it is. Exporting another component from it. Name it as align items basics. So align items, adding align items to the component style determines the alignment of children along the secondary axis. Means what? If primary axis is row, the secondary axis is column, or vice versa. So should children be aligned at the start, at the center, at the end, or stretch to fill? Available options here you can say about is, let's say, flex hyphen start, center, flex hyphen end, and stretch. So along with this, so let's say I'll go for justify content as center, flex direction as row. I'll make it to column initially. Along with this, I'll go and specify align items. So align items, I would say here, let's say center only. So let's render this. So you notice it's being imported from the same file. So it is at the center. Suppose I say it as flex hyphen start. So it's getting aligned at the beginning. See, this is about column. So this is going to work on a secondary axis, that's on a row. Suppose I just go for this as stretch. This is as stretch. Nothing has happened because here flex direction is about the column. So this particular align item is gonna apply, or it is gonna take care of the children along the secondary axis, that is on a row. So I just show you one thing. Let's say I'll remove the width for the first one. See, will it make any difference there? So it would make sense to stretch. If you really want to have that stretch to have an effect, children must not have a fixed dimension along with the secondary axis. See, I'll keep it as it is. I say this is for stretch and column. What I should not have is the width, because the secondary axis is dealing with the row and that's dealing with the width. So now that can be stretch. Whereas when I go for stretch and primary axis is row, I need not to have a height. I can have width, that is okay, but I need not to have height for it. So how do I check for that is, instead of flow flex direction going to be column, I'll make it as row. Understood? So this is how we can take care of layout with the Flexbox. Now let's explore about one of the new component, that is something about text input. So text input is a fundamental component for inputting the text into the application or into the apps via keyboard. So it allows you to handle the keyboard events. The props provide configurably for several features to that text input, like the features like auto correction, auto capitalization, placeholder text, different keyboard types, numeric keyboard, and number of things. So I'm just going to create a pretty simple one. I'll be creating one component. Let's say I'll name it as a pizza translator. So basically this component gonna do what? Whenever you go and type something and give a space, that's gonna be a one word. I'll translate that one word to another language. So here another language, I would be using one image called as a pizza. So that another language is nothing but I'm just gonna have one image as a pizza. So let me copy any of the component there, so it will take less time for me to type it again. So it's gonna be my pizza translator component. What all things that can have? So I want to have some kind of state which I would be using as when that is getting modified. So constructor gonna receive the props. Within that I'll declare the state. Now whenever you go for ES6 to write the class, it is mandatory for you to give a call to the base class constructor by using super. So this dot state is equal to, let's say I'm dealing with a state called the text. Initial value of that is empty string. In the render, what am I supposed to do? I'll take care of few things. So in the render, first I'll do it as I'll go for one style where I would set a padding to be 10. So padding is something which is inside the border. Margin is something which is outside of that. So I would be going for a text input. Let's say style for that is going to be, I'll set some kind of height. The thing is that this is the text input. So it should be coming from here. That is from the React Native. So I'll go for a text. I'll go for a text input. So I'll be using that text later on. That's why I'm including it right now. So text input this. It should have, let's say, some placeholder, which is going to be something like type here to translate. And for this, as I want to handle the changes which are going to occur here, I'll go for one event called as on change text. So what I would do for that, so I'll write event listener for it by using arrow function. So some variable text goes in. What am I supposed to do is this dot set state with whatever is going to be the value of it. So by this I'll be setting a new value to that text. Once I get that, I need to show it somewhere. So I'll go for a text tag for that, text element for that. So text component would render that text. So I'll be going for some padding there, font size, what should I show there? Some content. So that is this dot state dot text. What I want to show is, as and when I just go and type some kind of word there in my text input, it should show me that single word should replace with a image like a pizza. So I'm gonna split this with the spaces. That's how I come to know about the word dot map. So in the map, that individual word goes. So word, some variable as in, goes inside. So word and some image I'll show. So at the place of that image, at the place of that word, I'll be going for this image, which I would be joining with these spaces, which I would be joining with the spaces. Right, so this dot state dot text split by the spaces in the map, passing some variable. So it goes like this variable replaced with this particular image. That's gonna be a kind of word translator. So now if I just go and have that particular component there, pizza translator is being imported there, and have a look at this. So whatever you are able to see there is some kind of extra brackets. Yeah, those extra brackets are being copied there. That's why I could actually see that. So if you notice here, what I'm going to have is a type here to translate. I'll say my name is Abhijit. So basically every word separated by space is translated to new language. We call it as pizza language. So basically what I'm trying to show here is how we can handle the keyboard events there, how we can handle the keyboard events. So just reload it. Nothing is there, nothing is being converted. 1 space 2 space 3 and so on. So basically handling an event for this, that is on change text. Don't need to bother about the binding of this. So going for an arrow function, ES2050. Okay. So basically what we have seen here is about handling the text input, handling the on change text event of it. Same way we can even go for a concept called as a touchable. So we would basically go for a button where we can handle some kind of event. So user interact with mobile apps mainly through the touch. They can use a combination of gestures such as tapping on a button, scrolling a list, or zooming on a map. React Native provides components to handle all sorts of common gestures as well as comprehensive gesture responder system to allow for more advanced gesture recognition. But the one component you will most likely be interested in dealing with a basic button. So now we go and explore about the button, how we can handle the click event of it. So I would not say it here it is about a click event, I would say here about the handling the tap gesture. So what I would do for that is, for the timing I'll go for a ready-made component. I'll definitely explain you about that, but I won't type it. So I just go and have a separate component. I'll name it as touch underscore button basics.js. Applying some kind of style, container, button container, alternative button container. So I have a view that literally contains one more view with a button, one more view with a button. So there are two buttons, press me. First two are there, the difference is only about the color. Second view gonna have an alternative layout button. What I'm doing in alternative layout button, changing the flex direction and justify content. So based on that, these two buttons gonna be there. So if I render this button basic stuff, you would notice something. That is, for them I have taken care of handling the tap gesture. So what I've done for that, so if you notice in the code, the way we have handled something like an on text change in the previous example, here we are dealing with the on press. So basically press is my gesture. To handle that, a kind of helper is available on press. To that I am providing one event listener. So what am I doing in this underscore on press button? I want to show some message box. So we have an alert that is coming from a React Native, that's going to have an alert method. So alert.alert, you tap the button. So now if I just try to render this and run this particular with a basic button, you could see I'm going to have a multiple buttons there. So first two buttons, the difference is only about the color. Second two gonna have some kind of space between because of the kind of style that you're going. Flex direction is a row. For each and every one, I'm handling on press. So you tap the button. It's the same method I have provided, so everywhere I'll get the same result. You tap the button. You tap the button. You tap the button. Right? So this is how I can handle the gestures. It's same as that of the event handling that you would have done in normal React way. Right? Just to continuation with the same example, if this particular basic button does not look right for your application, what you can do is you can build your own button using any of the touchable components provided by React Native. Means it's not necessary you have to always go for this particular basic button. Instead of that, what you can do, you can go for some of the touchable components. So touchable components provide the capability to capture tapping gestures, and they can display the feedback when a gesture is recognized. So these components do not provide any default styling. However, you will need to do a bit work to get them looking nicely on your app. So we are going to have a different touchable components. There is something like a touchable highlight, touchable opacity, touchable native feedback, touchable without feedback. So when you go for a touchable highlight, you can use it anywhere you would use a button or link on a web. The view's background will be darkened when the user presses down this particular button, that is with the touchable highlight. Touchable opacity can be used to provide a feedback by reducing the opacity of the button, so allowing the background to be seen through while the user is pressing down. So you can change the opacity accordingly. Touchable native feedback means you may consider using touchable native feedback on Android to display ink surface reaction ripples that respond to the user's touch. So like kind of circular effect you get. That is what is the ink surface reaction ripples. Touchable without feedback means if you need to handle a tap gesture but you don't want any feedback to be displayed, then you can go for a use touchable without feedback. So I would be showing one demo for that. It's gonna be same kind of demo where I would be handling the on press. I'm even taking care of handling a on long press, because on a mobile device you can just press it quickly or you can go for a long press, and based on that you will be having a different implementation. So let's go for something as touchables.js. So I actually have copy pasted the code which is exactly same as the previous one, but what changes are there? In the previous example of the button, we just have used something as a button as a part of view. Instead of that, now I am going for those 4 touchable components. So inside the view, I am going to have a text to display something, but there is a touchable highlight, there is a touchable opacity, there is a touchable native feedback, there is a touchable without feedback. Again, I am going for touchable highlight, but in this case, I am handling long press, right? So let me render this and then talk about it. Let's import it. So based on that, you would see them like a button only. So what I'm doing is, instead of showing the alert, I'm trying to have some text to be there. So value initially it is not pressed. And that is the value it is being displayed here, that is a text. So when I click on any of the button, this is getting changed to press. Again, after some time interval, I am modifying that. See, I am modifying this in my on press button by using set state. There itself I am calling a set interval. After 2 seconds, I am trying to modify it back to the not press so that I could handle it for the multiple buttons. So if you notice here, the first thing that I am using is a touchable highlight. What did I say about a touchable highlight? The view's background will be darkened when the user presses down the button. So, right, if I click on this, I can see the view's background to be darkened, as well as the event listener is executed and showing that as pressed. Then there is a touchable opacity. So it's allowing the background to be seen through the while user is pressing down. So the background is getting displayed because I'm changing its opacity. The third one is about touchable native feedback. So touchable native feedback in the sense you will get on Android, this is the Android itself, display a ink surface reaction ripples that respond the user's touch. So you can see closely, wherever I click, I'll see that ink surface reaction ripples. This is without any feedback. So event listener is getting executed, not pressed getting displayed to the pressed, but I don't see any kind of effect on that button's background. This is again touchable highlight, so I can see that pressed. I keep on pressing it for the long time. Have a look at the output here. So you can see that as a long press. Instead of only the press, it's going to be long press. Right? So we are handling pressed and we are handling long pressed as well. So basically what we are trying to say is, if this particular button basic, not able to fulfill your need, as in it does not look right for your application, you can build your own button by using touchable components. So these are the 4 components provided by the React Native: touchable highlight, touchable opacity, touchable native feedback, touchable without feedback. Getting it? So hope things are clear. Now we'll explore about scroll view, list view, and then we would move towards the fetching the data from the server side. So by considering the time constraints and everything, I'll try to show you some ready-made code, but definitely I'll explain you about that. It's not like you are not at all able to understand. It is just I'm not going to type along with it. So I want to have one scroll view. What's something special about the scroll view? So basically scroll view is a generic scrolling container that can host multiple components and views together. The scrollable items need not to be homogeneous, like need not to be of same type, and you can scroll it both vertically as well as horizontally by setting the horizontal property of it. So what I'm going to do for that is I just have one scroll view, which is again provided by the native React Native to me, that would have some text, some image, some n number of things. So it could be any heterogeneous data. So let's create a new component there. Name it as scroll view.js. So you would notice here, this is the scroll view coming from the React Native. What I want to have one text with some images, text with some images, text with some images, and so on. So let's try to see the output first and then talk about that scroll view. So is scroll down and what happened next shocked me. This is the name is given for that particular component. If I just go to this now, and you can have a look at this, it's scroll view, where I'm trying to show a first of all text and then the image of my React Native logo. So you can see it's a vertical by default. If you like it, scrolling down. What's the best framework around? That is nothing but React Native. So great, you are able to achieve this scroll view over here. It's gonna do the scrolling for you. But what's something wrong with it? So basically scroll view works best to present a small amount of things of a limited size, because all the elements and views of a scroll view are rendered even if they are not currently shown on the screen. So that's the basic problem along with the scroll view. So it is best suitable when you have a small amount of data that is of limited size. The reason is all the elements and views of a scroll view are getting rendered even though they are not currently shown on the screen. So if you're going to have a long list of more items which can fit on the screen, you should go for a list view, or you should go for something called as a flat list. So scroll view works best to present a small amount of things of a limited size. All the elements and views of a scroll view are rendered even if they are not currently shown on the screen. So better way, whenever you're going to have a long list of more items which can fit on the screen, you should go for something called as a flat list. You should go for something called as a flat list. So let's go and have the flat list there. So what I would be doing for that is I'll be going for a new component. Suppose I'll name it as flat list basics. So importing React and the component from the React. Importing, I'm going to use a view, I'm going to use a text, I'm going to use definitely flat list and the style sheet to apply it there. All these things from the React Native. So export one component as a default one. Let's say flat list basics extends component. I'm going to have a render method which would return me something. So basically whenever I go for a flat list, you have to take care of two things. So the flat list component displays a scrolling list of changing but of similar structured data. Flat list gonna works well with long list of data where number of items might change over the time. So unlike the more generic scroll view, the flat list only renders elements those are currently showing on the screen, not all the elements at once. So when you go for this flat list component, it requires two properties or two props. One is a data and other is a render item. So basically data is the source of the information for the list and render item takes one item from the source and returns a formatted component to render to it. So let's say for this I'll go for some style sheet. So I just get that style sheet here. So styles, container and item. This kind of style I would be applying to those. Let my flat list have one view. Let my this flat list basics component should have one view where I would be applying the style as styles of container. Then I'll go for flat list component where data is going to have the source of the information and render item would render one item from the source and returns the formatted component to render. So I'll just go for some data within my flat list that I would like to render. So I'm just going for some cricketers list. You can see here key with those cricketer names. I'm just trying to have some n number of names there so that they won't fit directly in the screen. So the benefit of going for flat list is something like it only renders elements those are currently showing on the screen, not all the elements at once. So let's have a look at this. Instead of going for now scroll view, I'll go for the flat list basics. So can't find the component, something wrong while creation of this. Yeah, it's a comment happen, so it's gonna be component, refresh it. Just a second, is it stopped or what? No, it's working. Okay, still getting the error. Flat list basics component, what is that coming is from here only, that's what is being replaced. Where did you get comment? Let me see the line number 35 here somewhere. Yeah, it was not saved. Changes are not reflected there, so that comment was there which is replaced with the component. So you notice here it is showing me the flat list. The benefit of this is what? Till Virat only it is able to, it is actually gonna render that because only those are being seen. Whereas when I go for the remaining one after the Virat, what do I have? So Yajuvendra and Bhuvi, those would be rendered later on because those were not visible there, right? So flat list works well for long list of data where the number of items might change over the time. So unlike your more generic scroll view, flat list only render elements those are currently showing on the screen, not all the elements at once. So basically what something important here is about this data and the render item. Now you might want to show this kind of list, that is a kind of list, flat list itself I could say, based on some kind of category. So in such a scenario we can go for something called as a section list. So basically alternative for scroll view is going to be a flat list, is going to be a section list. So if you want to render a set of data broken into logical sections, maybe with some kind of section header similar to the UI table views on iOS, then the section list is the way. Basically we are having here cricketers names. So out of that few are batsmen, few are bowler, few are all-rounder. So I just want to categorize them with the different section, like batsman comes in this list, bowler comes in that list, all-rounder comes in that list. So based on that I would be going for creating that as a section list. So let me show you that component here. Again, by considering the time, I just go for a ready-made component. Don't worry, I'll definitely explain you about this one. So code you would be able to understand, it's not at all a big deal. So basics.js. So some kind of style sheet is available for that section list basics. You would notice the flat list, we are dealing with the data and render item. Same kind of stuff gonna be here. Instead of data, we are gonna have a sections. So individual section gonna have a respective data there. Render item is as it is gonna be there. So along with this sections and render item, which internally contains the data, I need to have a render section header as well, because how the section header should look like. So I am going for a section as a batsman, bowler, all-rounder, and this is the data specific to that section, which I am gonna render that. So if flat list is clear with the data and render item, here it's a sections which internally gonna have the data. So some things to be applied for the section, something is to be applied as the actual section data, something is to be applied for the section header. So now you would see, instead of just listing out the all players, they are categorized section wise. So batsman Virat, Rohit, Shikhar, MS, bowler Bhuvi, Jasprit, Shami, all-rounder Kedar, Ravindra, UV. So I just have created some logical sections here. So rendering the set of data broken into logical sections. So that would be possible with the help of section list, right? So we explore about fixed dimension, flex dimension. We explore about layout with the flexbox by using flex direction, justify content, align item. We have seen how we can handle the text inputs. We explore about the scroll view, but the problem with the scroll view is what? It's all gonna render all the data, either it is getting displayed there or no. So to overcome this problem, we are going for a list view. The list view is one is a flat list, other is a section list. So the benefit of going for a flat list is what? It's gonna render only that data which is being rendered there. It is gonna render only that data which is being shown within the screen. If it is not shown, it won't render it. Whereas you want to categorize your data in some sort of logical sections, you go for a section list. Now as per the agenda, there are two more things we need to explore. One is fetching the data from the server, and other is using some kind of component libraries with the native mobile app. So the next thing that we explore based on this is going for fetching the data from the server. So basically I must be having some kind of RESTful service available over this server which is giving me some kind of data. So to that RESTful service I have to make asynchronous call. Asynchronous call to do the CRUD operation. So I can fetch the data, I can go for a get to get all the data. I can get the data individually by the respective primary key of that data. I can go and insert the data, so I can go for a post. I can go and delete the data, so I can go for an HTTP delete. I can go and modify the data, so I can go for update. So basically I want to do some kind of CRUD operation with the server data. Definitely the server is not directly available from the client side. So we have a RESTful service which is doing all the CRUD operation with the database. Now it's a part of this particular mobile native application to make a consumption of that RESTful service. So when you talk from React or React Native perspective, one is a library, that is a React Native is a framework, whereas React is a JavaScript library. Any one of them does not provide you anything of their own to make a call to RESTful service, because these libraries and these like this framework, they are not meant for making a RESTful calls, but they are allowing you to make use of something else, some other third-party library or some other mechanism by which you can fetch the data. So in React as well as in the React Native, if you want to retrieve some kind of data from the RESTful service, you can make use of Fetch API introduced to the world by Google. That is the one technology by which you can make an asynchronous call, or you can make use of a AJAX request. So AJAX is another technology by which you can make a RESTful call by using a class called as a XML HTTP request. So you can go for plain AJAX, directly instantiating XML HTTP request object, or you can even go for some kind of third-party libraries to make AJAX calls, like library like a Frisbee or library like a Axios. So any of that you can make use of it. So the security model for XML HTTP request is definitely different than which is there on a web, as there is no concept of CORS in the native apps. So you can go for a Fetch API of Google, you can go for an XML HTTP request directly by instantiating that and creating an object of it, or going for third-party libraries like Frisbee or Axios. Even along with this, React Native also supports WebSockets. What is a WebSocket? A protocol which provides full duplex communication channel over a single TCP connection. So if your mobile native app wants to have a push notification, so possible only by using WebSockets. So here right now I'll be showing you a pretty simple example where I will be fetching some kind of data from the RESTful service, and I'm going to consume that RESTful service asynchronously by using Google's Fetch API. So let me show you this. Let me create a new component for that. I'll give name as, let's say, fetch example.js. So I'm just gonna import React and component from the React, whereas I need to have few other things from the React Native. I want to show the data, so I'll go for a flat list. I want to go for creation of a style sheet, so I'll go for a style sheet, text and view. Along with this, I'm also even going for something called the activity indicator. So basically, see, I'm going to make here an asynchronous request, which would take some time. So till the time it's going to read the data from the server and then render it here on my native app, I would like to show one circular loading indicator, like this is taking some time, it is getting loading. So for that I would be using this particular activity indicator. So what I'm going to do for it, a pretty simple code. Just going for one component here. Let me explain you this. So first of all, creating a style sheet for it, one for container, one for item. So going to maintain one state is loading. Initially it is true. That is just for showing the activity indicator. So in my component did mount, like in the last demo also we discussed, this component did mount gonna take care of many things. Which of the delay functions I would like to use, I can use it here. If I want to make any kind of AJAX call, I can do it in here. That is the component did mount. So what I'm doing is I'm using a Google's Fetch API. I don't need to include anything for that. The way I can directly use XML HTTP request object everywhere, same way I can use the fetch everywhere. So it is requesting for one RESTful service which is giving me some movies data. So what I can do, I just copy this URL, I go to the browser, and within the browser I'll just have that URL, so you'll get that JSON data. So this is the data which is coming from that service. So title, description and movies. I'm interested in the movies of that ID, title and release year. So some 5 records are there which I want to read it here. So like explicitly I'm going for only that movies data, so that's why I'm going to have title, description and the movies collection. So using fetch API is better as compared to Ajax call, because when you go with the Ajax, by default implementation of Ajax is by making use of a callback functions. Yes, Ajax is going to have a support for promises, it's even going to have a support for observables, but you have to explicitly take care of that. Whereas when you go for a Google's fetch API, the benefit you get is by default it is being implemented using promises. So what do you mean by promise? It is something like, tomorrow you're going to ask me some kind of question, I may not be able to answer that at that moment itself. So I'll reply to you like I'll get back to you within day or two. So which one is better? I'm not at all responding is better, or I'll respond you something as I'll get back to you in day or two. So in second case where I replied you like I'll get back to you in a day or two, at least you got some kind of promise. I didn't answer your question yet, but at least I have given you some kind of promise that I'll get back to you. So I could be reliable enough. So once that processing is done, you'll get the response. So once I'm free, I'll get to know about the answer of this particular question, I'll definitely get back to you. So handling the asynchronous call in a promise way is much more better as compared to handling them by using callbacks. So that's why we are preferably going for a fetch API. So when it's going to be successful, I'm going to get the response. So once I get the response, what I'm trying to do with that response? So passing some data as a response JSON, modifying the state that is loading to false, as well as one more state that is a data source, going to get this response JSON, only the movies part of it. So not interested in displaying this title and description, but only the movies part of it. So what I would be doing there, if it's an error, then it's getting catch in this catch. So I could directly make a fetch API call, but I want it should take some time, and meanwhile I should show this activity indicator. That's why I'm trying to call this asynchronous call using a fetch API in a set interval of 2 seconds. So meanwhile at least it should show me the activity indicator. So I'm checking if it is loading, that is true. What it should do? Go for a view with one activity indicator. So I have commented there, its activity indicator displays a circular loading indicator. If that is not the case, if it is not loading, means we just made it to the false, we got the response. So once you get the response, going for a flat list with the data as what? That data source, render item is what? Showing the item with what? Title, and I'm saying released in release year. So that particular movie released in this particular year. So let's have a look at this. Going for fetch example. So going to the emulator, I refresh it. So you can see here activity indicator, like this is like a loading. So I refresh it again. So for 2 seconds at least you'll see that activity indicator. After that the movie data, Star Wars released in 1977, Back to the Future released in 1985, Inception released in 2010, and so on. If you have a look at the browser, it's the same data that we are dealing with. It is being retrieved from the server. So again, there is nothing different as such in case of React Native to make a server calls asynchronously. It is being taken care by other libraries only or other technologies only. So you can go for a fetch API, you can go for asynchronous call using Ajax by directly using XML HTTP request object, or going for Axios or Frisbee. So React Native does not give you anything of its own. It is being taken care by these different libraries and all, right? So I hope you are pretty clear with making a server call, making call to the RESTful service. Now as per the agenda, only one thing which is remaining, and that's nothing but using component libraries within the native mobile app. So basically, beyond the React Native core components, there are many open source components available from the different component libraries. Those libraries gonna vary in size, shape from individual components that bridge native platforms functionality to the large component collections. So we need to use any of that. So for that reason, for my application, I'm trying to use one of the libraries. So we have a library like a React Native Elements, we have a library like a Native Base, we have a library like a Shorten UI. So these are the different largest component libraries collections are available. I want to use any of that. So what I've done for this, to use any of the library for my application, that is this awesome project, what I did is I have installed React-Native-Elements. So React Native Elements library I am trying to install along with my application, which is actually going to have a dependency which also needs to be installed. So I am going for React-Native-Vector-Icons. So these two things I'll install. I'll have their entry in my package.json also by saying --save. So if you notice, I'll show you the package.json of my application that is already being taken care here. So you would notice here React Native Elements and React Native Vector Icons. So that is being already taken care. So now component collections, how they are going to be helpful using something from these component libraries. They're definitely going to speed up the development by letting a developer focus on the architecture and business logic of the app without focusing on the layout and styling in the React Native, right? So we already have taken care of one of the composite library, that is nothing but component library, that is nothing but a React Native Elements. So what I want is, I just want to use it here. I just want to use any of the function from that particular library. So let me go for one component. I'll go for a one button, that is my component library button. So comp lib button.js. So I'm just gonna import React and component from the React. I'm just gonna import, let's say, alert view style sheet from React Native. And what I want to do is I want to import one button that is not my React standard button, but this is the button which is coming from React-Native-Elements. That is the library I have installed along with my application. So export default class, I'll say composite library button. So comp lib button is the component name. Extends component. So render would render that. Let's say return. What I would do for it. So basically I would be going to use a button from this particular stuff. So I just go for a view where I would be applying some kind of style to the container. So let's go and have that as well, where I'm setting the flexbox layout. Then this is the button which is coming from React Native Elements. So that is being raised, having some icon, button style, text style, title is welcome to React Native Elements, and I'm also going to handle this on press. So the way we have a render, we also have another function underscore on press button. What that's going to do, so when I click on it, I'll be going to show the message. So alert, I'll be saying you tapped the button. So what I've done is, first thing that I've done is I have taken care of installation of this component library, that is the React Native Elements, which has a dependency of React Native Vector Icons, those also installed there. Then importing a button from it, using it with the different prop styles. Let's have it there in an app. So comp lib button this way. So if you see the emulator there, I just reload it. This is the button which looks something better as compared to the normal button. The tap is also handled, so on press is also taken care, right? So these are the different demos those we have seen in these two modules. Here we are talking only about the React Native, so that's why the module name was like a overview of a React Native. Now here we didn't discuss anything about maintaining the state of your component which is being there of your mobile native app. So React Native or React itself does not give you anything of that sort. You probably need to deal with some kind of other third-party libraries. So basically Facebook has come up with React or React Native by considering one thing in the mind, that is about one architectural pattern they would like to follow, that is about unidirectional data flow. That's why you would have noticed there is no two-way data binding supported in React as well as in a React Native. So based on this, while developing their application or while implementing their state management, they are trying to follow this particular architectural pattern, that is unidirectional data flow. So that's why Facebook has also come up with one of the architectural pattern like a MVC, that is something called as a Flux. So Flux is one of the architectural pattern like a MVC, MVP or MVVM, but definitely the way of implementation or the way of architecture is going to be different. So the only one bottom line for that Flux architectural pattern is unidirectional data flow. Changes always should be made in a source and then it gets reflected to the target. So now for this Flux architectural pattern, there are a variety of implementations available. So Facebook itself has come up with a Flux as an implementation for Flux architectural pattern. Third-party vendors come up with a Fluxor, Fluxy, MacFlux, n number of different are there. Out of this, there is one third-party implementation is more popular about this Flux architectural pattern called as a Redux. So when you go for maintaining the state of your application, it is preferable you should make use of Redux as a library. So that is being used along with the React Native. So to combine the Redux library along with React or React Native application, you have to again go for one more library called as a React-Redux. So here we are, as I said, like here we are talking only about the overview of React Native, so that data management part is not being covered. Again, whichever the example those I have taken care, those are almost similar from the official site of React Native, that is from the Facebook itself. So you would be able to try out the things by just searching for the React Native. The first link will take you to the official site of it, that is facebook.github.io. If you go for a get started of it, this link, this building projects with a native code, will help you to have a prerequisite infrastructure available. Once that is done, learn the basics would help you with different demos those we have seen. So those demos are available here as well. Little bit of changes I have done in my demos and given you that with the further explanation. So please go through this, please implement this. This would be really going to be helpful for you in your actual project development. So I hope you guys are clear with these demos. So before we end this particular session, let's quickly go through all points those we have discussed today. So initially we just revised the state and props concept that we have seen in the last module. Then we went for height and width, or more precisely a fixed dimension, flex dimension. So flex dimension is about the flex box which is there in CSS3. So it's going to be almost same with few changes in a native app as well. Then we talk about layout with that particular flex box, where we discuss about flex direction, justify content, align items. After that, we went for handling a text input, which is again one of the element or kind of tag available for native apps. Then we discuss about scroll view, pros and cons related with that. Based on that, we went for something called a flat list, a kind of list view. Along with this, we also have seen like if you're going to create a native app, how you can fetch the data from the server. So again, React Native itself does not have anything of its own to make some kind of asynchronous calls to fetch the data from the server. So that can be explicitly taken care by a variety of ways. You can go for a fetch API given to you by Google. You can go for XML HTTP request object, that is to make an AJAX call. As well, we also have seen like how we can use different component libraries over there, right? So I hope these two modules would be helpful for you to get a kickstart to do the development about mobile native application using HTML, CSS and JavaScript skills. So wish you all the very best for Smart India Hackathon projects 2019. Thank you very much for patiently listening to these two modules. Thanks a lot.